Welcome everyone to this episode of the Mortgage by Gretchen show, where I talk to real people who are in the field of real estate and business, who are not only experts, but they are generous and willing to share their knowledge and their wisdom with all of us here. And the goal of the show is for you to gain some information and tips to help you reach your goals in business and real estate, and to take some of the guesswork out of what to do or who to call when you're in the process. And today I have Anita Bongers-Lewis with me. And Anita is a sales representative with the Doors to Wealth Real Estate Group, and which is part of the Remax Jazz brokerage. Anita is a quintessential business professional. She's a prolific real estate investor herself and a venerable pillar of the thriving investment culture here in Durham. She's a previous winner of the Canadian Real Estate Wealth Crew Investor Awards. And Anita has been featured as a keynote speaker and a panelist on the subject of unit legalization in Durham. She's well sought after for her experience and wisdom in the area of income-producing property investing. And I've been working with Anita and her team for a few years, and it's been very great to have her expertise and her ability to help clients that I know who need help, or especially investors, but anyone in the real estate market. She does know a lot about it, both from her own experience and working with many clients. So Anita, if you could please add anything to that introduction that you would like to add, I'd love to hear what you might have to say.
Yeah, so I am the team lead at the Doors to Wealth Real Estate Group, and we are a total right now of, my goodness, we're 6 agents now and some administrative staff. We started out very much as a niche for investor clients. And we've actually grown our residential real estate base quite a bit as well. It's just something that comes sort of part and parcel with what we do. But it's been my passion always to help people realize financial freedom through real estate. And that's how I found real estate. I'm somebody who was actually a real estate investor first, and then I became an agent after the fact. It's certainly not my first career, but my experience hands-on with my own investments helps my clients quite often, as well as the networks that we have and the education that we like to provide to our clients. And ultimately, we want to see people be successful. We want to see people grow their net worth and their wealth and be successful. And real estate is a way to help them do that, whether it's owning their own home as opposed to renting, or whether it's looking for an investment property. Okay,
awesome. And from, I guess, both yourself as well as your clients, have you done like a full range of, buy and hold, BRRRR strategy,
yeah,
flips, wholesaling, private, those needing
private, all of it. So we've helped, obviously we don't wholesale for people because that isn't the point of wholesaling, but we've helped people purchase wholesale or purchase from wholesalers. We've helped people buy a property to eventually flip. We've helped them sell their flips. We've helped with buy and hold, student rentals, and multiplexes, mixed use buildings. We kind of have run the gamut, and all the members of our teams are actually investors themselves. So they all hold investment properties of varying types, from student rentals, duplexes, triplexes, multiplexes, that kind of thing too. So we very much believe that in practicing what you preach and having firsthand experience in everything. But yeah, I'd say by and large, buy and hold is probably our biggest bunch of clients or type of client, but we've worked in almost everything in the investment space, and then residential obviously as well. People will often say, well, I want someone who specializes in investment or someone who specializes in residential. The reality is, and people won't really like that I say it, is investment is much more complicated than residential. So if I can handle the investment transactions, certainly residential is a little bit more cut and dry and a little bit more simplistic for us. The strategy is quite different, but as far as our strengths, we're quite strong in that field as well.
Okay, amazing. So share with us what you can about housing prices and what people should consider when they're deciding, should I buy, should I rent, should I hold off? Being January 2022, and we all know what's happening in pretty much the world, but definitely in GTA with prices rapidly increasing. Any thoughts about that and what you would suggest people to think about?
Yeah, so if you've been watching the market and paying any attention, you'll see that Durham went up 33%. And generally this whole East End area, you know, Peterborough, Coburg, out to Belleville, all these areas, we're all in like the 30 to 35% growth in the past year. So realistically, anything is a good option right now, really, to take action and to know what you want to do. So if you're looking to buy, I never think it's a bad time to buy. You just have to analyze every opportunity and every deal and make sure it fits what you're looking for. The opportunities will change over time. So gone are the times where you could buy a property, convert it to 2 units, and then refinance it and pull out 100% of what you've invested in it. You won't find that except if it's an insanely distressed property, or if it's in a very remote area. And there are certain risks with that type of a strategy that we, would only recommend to our very, very savvy investors, most likely. But if you're considering, selling, it's one of those things, when's the right time? At the end of the day, I'm a strong believer in real estate as an investment. I like it as buy and hold. It is how you make the most money in real estate oftentimes, is to hold it in the long term. However, we're buying it to fund something. We're buying it for some purpose. So a lot of people will eventually be selling their properties. I would say that it's definitely advisable to keep your eye out on the horizon. So if you're somebody who's thinking you're going to retire in the next 5 years, the next 2 years, or you want to make a big move or a big change, you want to invest in a different way, you should be paying attention to the market to see if it is the right time to sell right now. With our investment properties in particular, this is something we've discussed a lot, and you know this too, Gretchen. One of the biggest determining factors in an investment property and what price you'll get on the open market right now is whether you have tenants or not. That's the bottom line. So I am finding a lot of the sales that we're doing for investors, and we're doing a lot of them. It's because maybe it's a student rental and the students are going to be gone. So it's in between, tenants. So it's the right time to sell because it's going to fetch the best price when it's vacant. Or, a tenant has just given you notice that they're going to be leaving at the end of the month. This is when you list. It can make a really huge financial swing in the price to have 1, 2, all units empty versus to have them tenanted. If you're somebody who's going to sell, though, real estate has performed very well. We don't have any reason to think it won't perform well going forward. But if you are going to sell only if you know what you're going to do with those funds. Don't sell and put that money in the bank. Then hold on to the property and wait a bit longer, right? Because we all know that inflation's moving faster than what you're going to earn in interest at the bank, and your money's going to be worth less if you just hold it in the bank. You do want to leverage it somehow, grow it somehow. So don't sell just to hold on to the money. I wouldn't advise waiting for a drop. A lot of people are saying, when is this going to come down? Nobody knows. Anybody can try to give you an answer to that. They're making it up. None of us really know at this point in time. I don't anticipate we're going to see a drop. If I had to, pretend I had a crystal ball, we might see a plateau, or we'll see a small blip maybe. But the reality is interest rates aren't going to change quickly. Our economy can't handle that. And our interest rates are still insanely low. Even if they doubled tomorrow, our rates would still be historically very, very low. So people need to keep an eye on the bigger perspective or the bigger picture. I don't anticipate a drop. And if we did see a drop, I think it would be small because the buyer demand is so high that if we started to see this drop, our buyers would just come out of the woodwork again and correct that really, really quickly. We saw it in 2017 when things did dip. They dipped hard, but they recuperated fairly quickly. Certain areas of the market, not as much, but they did recuperate fairly quickly when that happened. We still ended up 2% higher by year end compared to January of that year. And people also need to realize, so if we look at Durham, we look at the last 20 years, the average home price has, if you annualize that appreciation, it was 8.99% per year over 20 years. That's a huge return on an investment you only put down 20%, in most cases. So people need to understand that it still is a good investment. It's just requiring a lot more capital to get in, and the cash flow numbers have changed a bit. So it's got to fit what you're looking for. And that's why we like to meet with our clients and really sit down and analyze what their needs, wants, and abilities are, and find out what's the best path for them based on their comfort level, the capital available, and the market.
I think that was an awesome answer. Very comprehensive and obviously well thought out. So thank you for that.
No problem.
So I get my next question was if they're buying a rental versus their primary home, would you answer that any differently if somebody was saying this is for my primary home, not an investment, rental investment?
Yeah, so I mean, prices have gone up quickly and prices are quite high, but again, I don't anticipate that we're going to see much change in that. But interest rates are low right now. So if you're thinking of making a move, yeah, it's a great time to get a new mortgage. So if you're going up a level, whether it's buying a bigger home or anything like that, it does make sense, because if you will say are just finishing a 5-year term on your mortgage, what kind of mortgage do you think 5 years ago, Gretchen, somebody would have right now if they had locked in for a fixed rate 5 years ago? What kind of number do you think that might be?
Well, most cases over 3% anyway, like 3 point, could even be, well, 3 to 4 years ago, yeah, 3.64, so.
So versus now, if they went and bought a new home, say they buy something that's $200,000 more than what their current home is, given the low mortgage rate, how much are their mortgage payments even really changing at the end of the day, knowing that their house is appreciated and you're only going to have a $200K difference between the current home and the new home? Is your mortgage payment really going to change very much? But you own a home that is now, valued by whatever percent more than your current home. So is it a good time to upsize? It is, because the interest rates are going to change. Will the interest rates changing bring home prices down? I doubt it. I think it may just stabilize them a little bit, and that's likely where we're going to fall. I'd love for someone to prove me wrong. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if prices went down and made it more affordable for people. That wouldn't be upsetting for me. At the same time, I own a portfolio of 8 duplexes. I like the value I've seen grow in this past 2 years during this pandemic. I'm pretty happy about that. That being said, I'm a buy and hold investor. The fluctuations aren't going to affect me very much until I decide I need to exit from my strategy. And as I've advised already, I've got a 5-year horizon always, where I'm looking to see what do I see kind of happening within our markets. And if I'm getting close to whatever timeline where I think I'm exiting out of the strategy, I need to be paying attention at least 2 years in advance to see what the market's doing. So I know, prices today, if I were to sell today, does that hit the goals that I want? And if I wait my additional 2 years, am I willing to gamble with the capital I could make today, right? So.
Very smart. And I think the government is agreeing with you, because today, January 26th, the Bank of Canada did not increase the overnight rate, which means the prime rate is not changing. And if the government felt that this was the fix to get prices down, they would have increased it. So yeah, very smart answer once again. I appreciate it. People are going to enjoy listening to this, so I'm excited.
Good.
Yeah. So for someone investing, what strategies have you seen work best? Now, I know that's a really broad statement, because like you said, it really depends on the person. So, maybe you could touch on, what kind of strategy for Airbnb, who that might be good for, or flipping, who might that be good for, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking at Airbnb, vacation type rentals, those types of properties, you just have to realize that they're a more hands-on investment. You're having a greater turnover because they're short-term rentals. So your systems and processes you have to set up are different. They can be more lucrative from a cash flow perspective, but you also have higher liability and a few more headaches with the changeover all the time. But if that fits what you're looking for, that could work. You're also usually buying a single family home if that's the case. You're not competing with investors who are looking for multi-unit properties. So maybe you have a better opportunity if that's the case, except if it's a cottage property. Cottage markets have gone maybe more insane than even all the other markets since COVID started. So that is a market that is highly competitive and in huge demand. A lot of deals are happening sort of without even going to the market in the cottage market versus flip type strategy. It's a tough strategy right now because the prices have gone up so aggressively. It is really hard to get a property under contract for a really low price point. You likely have to find a very motivated seller, and that is usually found through off-market types of deals or wholesale types of deals. The reality is as an agent, if I was to help even a motivated seller sell their property, my job is to give them the best advice that will get them the best price. And that advice is never to sell off market. It is always to go to market and drum up a bidding war, at least in this market currently. That's the best advice. So for flippers, usually they're finding their market or their properties off market. I've just sold a couple in the last couple of months for some of our flippers. She just won last night. And they've done well. They've purchased at really great prices. When I hear the numbers they get, it's phenomenal. But these are people who have a lot of marketing dollars behind them, a lot of experience behind them, and are working really, really hard to find these deals. And then they can do quite well on the flip, but you have to be careful. Flip is active income, right? So you're being taxed 100% at your marginal tax rate. So you need to make a very big difference between your purchase and your sale price, because you've got legal fees, you've got realtor fees, you've got all the renovations you've done. There's a lot of costs.
Yeah,
so
your holding costs for your mortgage.
Exactly. And I would say that they're a bigger gamble or a little bit of a bigger risk. So if you have good experience, great. That makes a huge difference. But flips they can make or break you sometimes. It's a little bit scary what they can do with the flips, and if you don't know your market. So you need to really understand your market and then realize you can purchase a flip today. The market can change 3 months down the road when you're done your flip, and you have no control. So it's a bit speculative. So that's something you have to be careful with. Versus buy and hold, which is, in my opinion, probably the best sort of approach from a risk perspective. Not always from a cash flow perspective, not usually from a cash flow perspective, but from a risk perspective, the risk is lower if you're holding long term. Like I said, 20 years in Durham, you would have done 9% year over year, which is pretty phenomenal given that you only have to put 20% down. It's a really good return on your investment. But you have to have the capital. You have to be able to keep that capital in the property for a given period of time. You still have to manage that property as well. And depending on the property type, that's more work, less work. It really depends what you're doing. But I will say the biggest growth in net worth is through the buy and hold approach for sure.
Okay.
It depends what you're looking for, right? Yeah.
Yep. Really key. It depends. Yeah, absolutely. And your investments, are they all in Durham, or do you have any outside of Durham region?
Ours are all in Durham personally. So those that my husband and I own are all in Durham, but we've helped clients buy Lindsay, Peterborough, Port Hope, Coburg, all the way out to Belleville, and then of course the Durham area as well.
Okay. And if you have clients who say, hey, I think I want to try that, buying in Nova Scotia where the prices are lower, or some other area, I assume you have partners that you would then refer people to.
Yeah,
areas.
That's just it. We would try to refer them to somebody that we know who is, solid. If it's an investment property, especially, because you need to speak to somebody who does know their market, does know the rent, does know the tenant profiles, does understand where the value is and where the risk is. Otherwise, you're not nearby, so you have a greater risk. You can't drive by the area and understand what it looks like. You can't get a feel for what it's actually like. Versus, if you're buying somewhere in your own backyard, a little bit easier because you have that firsthand knowledge. But if you're in another market, we always try to find somebody who we have confidence in, who can represent you in a way that is best for you.
That's great. Okay, perfect. So when you're talking about the investors, what do you recommend in terms of like the down payment amount or percentage, as well as when is the best time to refinance to pull out some equity in the property?
Realistically, we always want to encourage you to make sure the property cash flows, and those numbers are a lot more slim now to get the cash flow after all your expenses. There's your hard costs and soft costs. So your hard cost is your property tax, your mortgage, your insurance. Those things are not changing. Those are sort of set in stone. And then you have variable costs like possible vacancy, repairs and maintenance. Maybe you have to pay a property manager, maybe you don't. So we'd like you to account for all of those costs when you analyze a property. Even if you're managing your own property, you may not always want to manage your own property. So I would build that into your numbers, because you should, as I do, pay yourself for the property management that you do.
That's a good point.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you want to be cash flow positive in any property, because that's what's buffering you or protecting you against interest rate changes, right? If the rates start to change and you have a variable mortgage, you don't want to fall into a cash flow negative position. That being said, I mean, if it makes sense for you, it makes sense for you. Some people are okay to put in a little bit of extra money each month because they would do it with their RSPs and not think twice about it, that's a different investment that, you know, they'd be contributing to monthly, things like that. So if you want to liken it to something like an RSP, you could continue to contribute, but we like you to be cash flow positive just because it protects you, especially if you have a non-paying tenant or other things can go wrong from time to time. So we need to have a buffer there. So as you tell everybody, I'm sure, 20% down is the minimum if it's an investment property. In reality, though, sometimes to boost your cash flow numbers, you might choose to put 25% down or even 30% down, depending on where you're investing and what your capital looks like. But more than that, I'd say it comes down to the refinance is where I think you may not always refinance to the full amount that you would like to have or that you can get, I suppose. So it's great. We're seeing these legal 3+2 units in Oshawa sell for over $1 million now for these duplexes, right? That's great, but your market rent may be more cash flow neutral, maybe a little bit cash flow negative if you've had tenants in there a while who are underpaying, things like that. So you may choose that while you could refinance at say $1,050,000, you may say, let's refinance to $950 and 80% loan to value or whatever they're going to allow you to refinance to. You may choose to play with that number. So you may be allowed X dollars in the refinance. You may choose to play with that so that your cash flow numbers are something a little bit more comfortable for you. And that's more what I'd advise. And I'd say that right now, unless you got a home run of a deal, you probably wait to the 1 year mark to do your refinance.
Okay. Excellent advice. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. You're educating me.
Well, what have you seen with people in their refinances as far as like the people who do it immediately versus wait just a year? Have you seen a big difference?
Well, I would say sometimes the lenders get pushback if it's less than a year, if you're trying to stay with the same lender and just refi with them. So some of them are saying, no, you can't for a year. But, you know, some people, if they've done the variable and they're going to break it anyway, and they don't mind. But yeah, I think your point is totally valid. Like, yeah, you can do something, but do you sure you really want to? And have you thought about the long term and are you now hurting your cash flow position? Perfect things to bring up to people who maybe aren't thinking it through.
Yeah. And the earlier point of what are you going to do with those funds? It's great if you remove them from the property, but now you're paying a bigger mortgage. Why have you removed those funds if you don't plan on doing something with them? So if it's paying down a line of credit and saving you interest, things like that, yeah, that makes sense. If you want to buy the next property or be prepared to buy the next property, fantastic. All of those things make sense. To refinance just for the sake of refinancing and having money sit in your bank account doesn't always make a lot of sense.
Yeah, most of the people I'm talking to are doing it to buy the next property.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But I still agree, like, even if that's your goal, make sure the whole picture works, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You're doing some sessions with your team on comparing two properties and the cash flow. Tell us a bit about these sessions and how people can find out more and join them.
Yeah, so we used to do property tours in person, but COVID, that's not something people are comfortable with anymore. And I don't know if people will ever be comfortable with us coming through with groups of 5, 10, 15 people into their properties anymore. I think COVID may have intimidated people in that respect. So we started going to a virtual tour where we would record a walkthrough of a property, and then live online, we would go through our video with people. It got a little boring for people just virtually walking through properties. So we decided, you know, the point of our tours was not to sell homes, it was to educate people, to give people some real life examples of properties that are on the market and see what needs to be done. But going through 5, 6 properties that way, it became a little bit boring, I think. So we've revamped things. So in February, we'll be doing a real analysis of at least 2 properties that are currently on the market in different areas, depending on which type of tour we're doing. But what we want to do is we will still video through a property, or we'll go through their online video, that kind of thing. And we'll talk about what the nuts and bolts of what needs to be done for that property, what the property is likely to sell for, what a renovation is likely to cost, what a refinance is likely to look like, what rents are going to look like, what your tenant profile more than likely looks like, and what the whole process looks like from start to finish with a pro forma or a financial analysis, so people can understand a real scenario. And we'll compare a couple that have their own variables or their own unique challenges to go through, so that people can understand what type of challenge they're willing to take on or what's out of their comfort zone. The reality is, and we've known this for some time now, is you do make the most money if you solve a problem or take on a problem that someone else is not willing to deal with. Always, you'll make a buck that way. But are you willing to be that person to take on that problem? There's a reason that first person doesn't want to take on that problem. So we'd like to walk through some different scenarios to give people some out of the box thinking, some real accurate examples of what's going on in the market so that they can make the best educated decisions for themselves. And then ultimately, if they find a market they like or a strategy they like, then we go out one-on-one and take them out to see properties so that we can hone in the approach. What I found is right now, because the market is changing so often, it's the client for us that's saying, well, maybe I want Peterborough or Lindsay or Coburg, and I can do a flip or a BRRR strategy. Just send me what's good. I can't help you there. We do need to hone in on things a little bit. It's great. Sure, I see this happen and that happens, but my client who's ready for this property, this strategy, this market, they're the ones who are going to find it first and go to see it first, because they don't have to start back from square one and be like, okay, well, what were the economics of this deal? And what was my tenant profile going to be like here? You do want to hone in because the market is moving so quickly. It's really good if you have a firm idea of what you're looking for before you get started, or else you just get caught in the weeds and analysis paralysis, and that's risk. So that is what the tours, the new tours, are meant to sort of help people sort out and figure out what these real numbers look like for them. And we may from time to time bring in some examples of our own clients of actual, projects that they've done where we can, if they're willing to share their numbers. I purchased at this is what my renovation is. I ended up renting at, this much. This is the type of tenant I got into my property. Here's a few pictures of the finished product, right? Obviously, those won't be super current because by the time they've gone through the process, it's 6 months later. But we just really want to provide people with value and actual real information, true and accurate. None of this HGTV doctored numbers and funny stuff. Everyone wants to DIY everything, but we want to give people value. And I think that's the best way that we can do that right now.
Okay. So how do people find you and learn how they can join?
So anyone can email me. It's just Anita@doorstowealth.com, or you can look us up online at doorstowealth.com, or you can reach out to me directly by cell phone, 416-209-8660. And I'm happy always to set up an initial chat with people to get their feet wet and see kind of what they're thinking and point them in the right direction. But a lot of people will start by being a part of our mailing list, where we send out, say, a monthly investor report. If you're a residential buyer, we have a residential report that's a little bit different than that. And we have some tools and other information that they can sort of browse through before they get started. And then, they have to find out what resonates with them. We set up a call to hone them in on what they're looking for, connect them with the right people, like mortgage agents and brokers, who are going to be able to help them and help them understand what their purchasing power is and what's realistic for them. Because that's the problem too, is there are people out there who don't realize what they could actually be doing with their money. They just don't know. And then there are other people who heads are in the clouds a little bit and think, oh, I'll just buy another property, no problem. But, and I'm sure you see it sometimes, they're like, oh, well, I have this debt and it's reducing my qualification by this much, and I have this lease and I have this credit card, and they think they're very financially savvy and they've done such a great job. But in reality, how the lender's looking at them is not quite as favorable as they may think that it is. So we do like to have a bit of a reality check with anyone who works with us, because I'm not in the business of making you fall in love with a property, a strategy, an idea, and then breaking your heart. That's not my business. My business is taking what your reality is, what the market's reality is, and what your end goal is, and trying to marry that as best we can in a way that's going to get you where you need to be for the future.
Excellent. What's your last piece of advice for Canadians right now?
Don't wait. I don't think it's a good idea to wait if you're going to do something with this market. I remember when this pandemic was first announced, the number of people who said, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. Do you know what's happened with those people? They're positioning themselves to get ready to buy, but the market's moving. They're taking one step forward, but the market's taking 2 steps forward. They're not able to catch up, or they get stuck. They're anchored in the past. And we had this conversation at one of our Durham investors group meetings a while back, price anchoring. I could get stuck in it. 8 years ago, I was buying properties in the 300s. It's insane. I can't stay anchored in the past. And trust me, it is hard for me to accept the reality sometimes too of where the prices have gone, because I've seen it. I've seen it for many years, and I've seen what's changed. But the reality is the market is not what I say it is. The market is what somebody's willing to pay for a particular property. We have a lot of clients saying, well, I'm not willing to go into a bidding war. Then you're probably not going to buy a property right now, or you're going to buy something distressed or something in a different market or something that's just not something other people are looking for, which is definitely a possibility. We can find that sometimes. But if other people don't want it, there's a reason for that. And maybe you don't want it either. It may not be a good investment property. It may have a lot of problems, all these different factors. But the reality is sitting back and waiting has proved to be a huge problem for a lot of our clients. And now they're saying, well, we're not buying in Durham. I guess we'll look in Peterborough. I guess we'll look in Belleville, because those price points have changed so much. And they sat back and watched. What did we do? 2 months of the pandemic, we bought a house, we bought a property and converted it into 2 units. And I can tell you, had we not even converted that property into 2 units, its value would have gone up by, in these 2 years, $350,000 to $400,000 without us lifting a finger. Simply by purchasing it, we did exceptionally well. Is that going to always happen? No. By no means are we going to see these numbers forever. But historically, with buy and hold, you will always do better if you hold over the long term. So waiting longer, and if your strategy is buy and hold and you're going to hold it, if you paid $20,000 too much, in the grand scheme of things, yes, it takes capital out of your pocket, and that is the hard part. But the reality is when you hold it over the long term, your return on investment, it's a small percentage change. And you got in the market. You got in the market today, not 2 years from now. So you didn't. So for people like myself, you didn't lose the, 45 to 50% appreciation I've seen in the last home I bought in under 2 years. It's probably about 50% appreciation in under 2 years. So it is important to take action. And I'm not saying just buy anything and be crazy, but the reality is you can't make money in the market if you're not in the market. And that's the thing. There's a lot of analysis paralysis and fear over these prices. We bought back in 2017 before things dipped. And I remember we bought a property for $500,000. We were the first people we knew who crossed that $500,000 number. And we're like, oh, geez, we're going to convert it to 2 units. And then the market dipped. We converted it. We spent a lot of money to convert it. And the refinance only came in at $540,000. Not even worth breaking the mortgage hardly for that at that point. But do I regret it? Not for 1 second. Because do you know what that property is worth right now?
Oh,
that property's worth
$1 million or more.
Yeah, $1 million, probably $1 million right now. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying that's how it always goes, but we do know historically buy and hold. As long as you continue to hold, you will rebound. So as long as it's not your last $5,000 and you're not over leveraging yourself, and you've left it some cushion for cash flow and mortgage interest rate changes, you will more than likely do very well. There's a whole lot of other factors we can get into, like choosing the right tenants so you don't end up with problems there, and mitigating water issues, and 1,000 other issues that we talk about commonly through our social media and that kind of stuff. But again, you can't make the money if you don't take action. And sitting back and waiting, historically, in the last 8 years since I've been investing, waiting has never been a good option. So,
okay, well, very educated, helpful advice. Thank you so much for giving us your knowledge and experience and input. I really appreciate it. I feel it's very valuable, and people are going to be grateful to have it. So thank you for being here today and having this conversation with me.
Anytime. Thanks for inviting me, Gretchen. That was great.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.